So why church? Question that lots of people are asking. Lots of people think they have found the answer, and they have decided to opt out of church. There are what the surveys call the nones, N-O-N-E-S. When they do a survey asking about their religious affiliation, they will say none. And that number is increasing and increasing and increasing. And then the researchers describe there being the gons as well. Those who once used to go to church and have given up on church, no longer go to church, either for a period or forever. So why go to church? A question we need to keep on asking, because the numbers of people going to particular churches, and I guess overall in the UK, have been going down and down and down. And as the writer of Hebrews says, 2,000 years ago, some are in the habit of giving up meeting. So what do we think? What do we do about that? And why church? Really good question to ask afresh this morning. Why church? So what was going on at the time when Hebrews was written? And who wrote it? Nobody knows who wrote the book of Hebrews. Some say Paul, but others say no, the Greek is too sophisticated and different to the way Paul used to write. I love the fact that some people say it was Barnabas who was that encourager of Paul. And some people even say that Barnabas is the rich young ruler that Jesus met and who turned his back and walked away from Jesus. And I think within this there is a hint then that God never gives up on anybody. That's not always the end of the story when we say no to God. But it was written, I think, most people think it was written to a house church in Rome. And this house church would have been about 15, 20 people, because most of the churches in those days were pretty small, no buildings like this. Often in a richer person's house, people would gather together to meet. Most think it happened to be in Rome. So writing to those who had been Jews, the Hebrews, but converted to Christianity and gathering together in a small house church in Rome. And some say it was around AD 70, so 30, 40 years after Jesus, and they would say that it looks like the temple in Jerusalem that is being referred to was still intact. And that was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. But others say no, they believe it was written much later. But what it would have been is a mixture of second generation Christians. So they wouldn't have met Jesus, they probably wouldn't have met the apostles, or not all of them. It would have been a faith that had been passed down through a generation. And what seemed to be happening is that for various reasons, people in this church were giving up on church. They were getting into the habit of not meeting up, not turning up. Different thoughts to why that might be happening. One, Jesus was taking his time to come back. The day of the Lord, that the writer mentions. Many, including Paul, had been expecting Jesus to come back very, very quickly. And as you and I, we're not first generation Christians. Some of us might be saying, well, he's taking his time now. That was going on. Some people were giving up on their faith and doubting their faith. Also, the church had been through persecution. You read later on in the chapter, severe persecution. And in the 60s, AD 60s, the emperor, the Roman emperor, was starting to unleash more and more persecution upon the Christians. And some of them, who had been Jewish, were going back to their Jewish roots and away from the church, so dropping out. Lots of different reasons why people were giving up, meeting up together. If we're seen going into this house, we could be heaping problems. Maybe all this hope we have in Jesus is not well founded. And that's why the author emphasises this. Gather together to keep that hope alive, to spur each other on, to encourage each other. Spur each other on to love each other. Learn to love God. Learn to love each other more and more in community, because you can't do that on your own. It's not about a solo faith. It's about doing this together. And also saying, not just a wishy-washy love, but agape love. Love in action. Deeds, supporting each other in practical, obvious ways. So why are people, with that in mind, giving up going to church today? And this sermon isn't going to be one of those which is quite frequent, I think, over the years. Guilt. You need to come every Sunday. You need to do more than Sunday. You need to come during the week. And if you miss a Sunday, you're in trouble. This isn't trying to persuade you of all the reasons you should be here. Let's reflect on why people do stop going. You might have thought about stopping. You might have stopped for a while. And you might have had good reason. I have thought over the years, blow that, there are better things to do on a Sunday, I often think, when I'm in a low place. But there are really good things to do on a Sunday. When we have a Sunday off, I love it. Reading the papers, going for walks, going for coffee, walking the dogs, meeting other people. Well, there's loads of them who don't go to church. There's some fantastic things to do out there. Other people might give up on church because they've fallen out with somebody. They might have got a bad look from somebody. On that level, some people might have given up on church. Or there might be more serious problems. They might have felt offended or slighted or ignored. That could be in their minds. Or it might be total reality or a mixture of the two. It can be stressful coming to church. In families where one of the partners wants to go to another church or doesn't want to go to church or feels pressurised in going to church or made to feel guilty. Blow that, they say. And in the end, you get out of the habit of going to church. Many reasons to give up. I think one of the main reasons is when questions of faith arise and the old answers that people have been brought up with don't seem to fit anymore. And they're told, perhaps by others, just to knuckle down and carry on and stop thinking, stop asking questions. And they don't feel that church is a place for their doubts and for what's really going on and the incongruence they feel between what they're being taught and how church is and what's going on in the real world. And when they start to ask questions, they're shut down. Many have given up on church because of how they see certain groups in society treated by church. And not necessarily people who are gay, but people who aren't, but they see how people are treated if they're LGBT. And they end up thinking, well, I don't want to be a part of a church or an organisation like that, so I'm giving up on church. Or church don't seem to be into justice, they don't seem to be into climate change, they don't seem to be getting what's really going on. Church is out of touch, so I'm going to withdraw myself from this church. Or their own crisis, maybe their mid-faith crisis. They feel uncomfortable going to church, they don't want to play the game, and they certainly don't want religiosity anymore. I think people used to put up with that, or think that's what church was all about, but going through the motions. People are opting out, opting with their feet more and more. It's a good reason. There's also some not so good reasons to go to church. What could they be? Some people go to church, or are part of church, out of guilt. I better not stop going, otherwise I might lose my place in heaven. I might end up in somewhere a lot worse. Or they feel pressure from their partner or their parents. I believe there comes a point when children are to be given the freedom to choose. And actually partners are given the freedom to choose. Some people go out of guilt, pressure. Some people go because it's all they know. Looking back at a lot of people's experiences of church, they go to church Sunday morning, lunchtime, evening. They would go to church often during the week, and their whole lives would be centred around their church, and they would actually stop mixing so much with people who weren't Christians or people who weren't part of their church. And the tragedy is then if something happens whereby they leave that church, they end up being very, very lonely. And that fear of loneliness can stop. And that's the encouragement for all of us, not just to be churchy Christians, but to be living, talks about a living faith, the living sacrifice, to keep alive in our faith and to embrace the world and live in the world as salt and light. So many reasons that aren't so good. Some people go to church because it's the only place they're tolerated. If they acted in that way, they'd be thrown out of the golf club. They won't be let into the gym. Some people go to church to exert their power and control. This is where people will respect me. This is where I'm going to get my little bit of the church and feed my ego. Let's be real. Different reasons, maybe not so good reasons why people go to church. What are the healthier reasons that people might go to church? And again, the writer to the Hebrews is getting at some of that. We are not meant to be solo Christians. This is the community, not the only one, but this is the community which is focused on Christ. That is the one who unites us, levels us, and the one we look to. This is the community where we are to spur each other on, to keep our hope alive and fresh alive. Not in a denial way, not in a community that doesn't allow doubts and dips in faith, but that gathers together, and when our brothers and sisters are going through a dip, to be alongside them, not telling them to snap out of it, but to be alongside them and to hold them up in prayer and to hold them in love. This is the community where, centred on Christ, we are to become more Christ-like and learn what that means. Learning to love each other in a deep way. Learning to love each other in action. Not that we just then keep it here, but we do it together in community. And hopefully that overflows in our daily lives as well. We are a school of love. This is a community, if it's safe, where we learn to forgive each other. Isn't it fantastic that we are imperfect here? I was laughing with the musicians before the service. I learned over the weekend that some of the bigger churches, they have auto-tuning for their singers. So when they hit a bad note, it corrects it automatically. Some churches, we don't need it here. Some churches are going for perfection or trying to look for perfection. I love the fact that we are not perfect. Because we learn in the mess. God works best in the mess. And actually, it's when things go wrong that we really learn how to forgive and love each other. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the amazing German theologian who was killed in a concentration camp, he described it in this way. He said, that which distinguishes you from me, us from each other, is the will. God's will, our will, your will, my will. And actually, when we come together in community, it is our wills that clash, not all the time, by wanting to assert my will, my way over you. And it's through that clashing in a safe community that commits for the long term. It's a bit like stones with jagged edges on. They bash against each other and they start to smooth off the rough edges. Dietrich Bonhoeffer describes how that which distinguishes thee from me, you from me, the will, that is what is going to distinguish us in heaven as well. The thing is, at that stage, with Christ's help, all these different wills will have been learning to live with each other in harmony, in that perfect community, as in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Perfect love. And it's a school of love, where we work in the midst of your imperfections, my imperfections, our imperfections, learning to love each other and learning to love others. We are not meant to do it on our own, because you can't do it on your own. This is where the Reformation went a bit wrong. It became a very individualistic faith. It's about you being saved. And there's a side of that, but too many of us as Christians are individualists. We miss out on our Jewish heritage, community, family, God's people learning and growing together.